everyone. My name is Ryan Cam, and welcome back to the horror movie Iceberg podcast, where myself and Russell Howell will watch disturbing horror movies until we tap out. Russell, how are you?
Good. And we're here for another show, so we haven't tapped out just yet. We still have so many more to go. Can't tap out yet, man. We're just unearthing this big glacier that is this big iceberg, this big hunk of ice.
Yeah. Well, next up on the iceberg, we've already technically dealt with a franchise in the form of Blair Witch. However, because I've already talked about the first one a lot, we omitted the first one. But on this iceberg, we're doing our first full franchise retrospective. We are tackling Paranormal Activity. And in my tease from the last episode, I said we were just talking about the first one. However, we made the mutual decision to cover Paranormal Activity 1 and 2 this time. Then in a couple weeks, we'll do 3, 4, and the marked ones. And then a couple more weeks after that, we will do Ghost Dimension and Next of Kin. And I hope that makes sense for y'all, because we went back and forth on it, but we decided that we've got a lot more movies on this iceberg to tackle, so we'll just cover all of these as fast as possible and in a concise way, while also being substantive. In general, this is a franchise that I think doesn't get a ton of respect. There are bad ones in this franchise, sure, and we will get to those. Yeah. However, I was talking to Russell off air, and I'll say it, I think 1, 2, and 3, if it was just left alone as a trilogy, and of course it wasn't, but I'm hypothetically here, if it just left alone as a trilogy, it would have been just a pretty underrated trilogy.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, just like in any franchise, you get those ones where like, oh, I can't believe that's a movie in the franchise. You know, your Freddy Krueger, your Nightmare on Elm Street 2s. You know what I mean? Yeah, you're gonna have ones that are the gold standard. Obviously, the OG, the first one. I know Dream Warriors is really beloved. New Nightmare. Then you get the ones that are like, why did we do this? But no, these two, I'm glad to be tackling these two, man. These are some bangers there.
Well, before we get started, if you like this video, leave a like, subscribe. We would greatly appreciate it. If you're listening on Spotify, leave 5 stars. We would love that as well. Well, let's get into it. And first, talking about the original Paranormal Activity. This was released in 2007. It was written and directed by Oren Peli, and it starred Katie Featherston and Micah Sloat as a married couple named Katie and Micah. I know,
what?
Inspired names. Inspired names, I know. But it tells the story of the two of them moving into a new home together in San Diego for the first time. However, Katie begins to believe that the house is haunted, and she is being stalked by an evil presence. And, well, she's not entirely wrong about that. Now, this might be one of the most fascinating horror movies that I have done research for, because I remember, and this was before I was deep into movies like I am now, like my first big year of movie watching was 2010, so this was just on the peripheral for me. But I distinctly remember the marketing campaign for this, where people had to demand vote in order to see it. There was a demand campaign, and I forget the name of the website now off the top of my head, but basically if it reached a certain amount of demands, like if it's reached, it was like a straw poll, if you will. If it reached a certain amount of we want to see this, then it would go wide. I think it was like 1 million, and it got to that 1 million after this movie got shopped around at various festivals. There was something even a concern
like that. There was not 100% sure.
There was a concern that this movie wouldn't hit with audiences, because there was a studio exec who was at a festival and saw people leaving and like, what's going on here? But it turns out people were leaving because they were disturbed by what they were seeing. So the movie was actually hitting the entire time. And I came late to this movie. I ended up watching it for the first time last year to prepare for a horror trivia match. And this series would get better, but I think just in terms of what they started with, I think this movie, in certain aspects, is underrated.
No, I mean I agree. I gave it 5 stars on my letterbox because of the fact that, it draws from that 1999 feel that I got with Blair Witch Project. Obviously, I think that really set the tone for those found footage films. I think it is the kind of like the gold standard. I feel like, but this movie here, seeing it in 2007 in a theater with that buzz around it, figure I was 24. I mean, man, you just can't beat the buzz, man. That was a perfect age, I think, for it. Obviously, I already knew about Blair Witch Project. The hype was real with this movie, though. I remember going to a Michigan football game, and I remember seeing like ads or whatever, like posters or whatever, like make sure you like vote for it. Because I remember this was like aimed for college town kids too, I believe. Um, and I think the big thing on this one was Spielberg attached his name to it. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think he's some kind of, there was his name's involved in this movie somehow. I don't know if it was like not produced or whatever, what have you. Um, but yeah, seeing this movie in the theater, I mean, just that's what the movie going experience is all about, especially for horror films. And I think this one absolutely delivered. You know what I mean?
So, according to what I just looked up here, Spielberg and DreamWorks had a sort of handshake deal to remake this movie into a big budget horror movie that never saw the light of day. And
Okay.
honestly, I'm kind of glad that it didn't happen. No offense to Spielberg. I mean, he's
Yeah.
Spielberg. But I
Yeah.
feel like the movie works because it primarily takes place in a random home, in a random street, in anywhere in America. And Katie and Micah feel like real people. They feel like they're people that are really being affected by this thing. The movie
100%. Yeah.
never the movie never breaks immersion. Like, it just soaks you in it. It grounds you in this world. And weird and strange and terrifying things do happen, but it's a slow drip. The movie takes place over 3 weeks, 21
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
And just over time, things just get worse and worse and worse. And it's not a case of like, I think I brought up Poltergeist in another movie in my Presence review, where I talked about Poltergeist, where it's like the ghosts are trying to drag Carol Ann to literal Christian hell. That's not what happens here. It's later explained what is
Yeah.
happening and given more detail, which we'll talk about as these movies progress. But for the moment, you don't know, and that's what's even more terrifying.
You know, we don't get that full scare. I think the scariest part is building it up day 1, day 3, day 7, day 8. You know what I mean? Like building that tension because it's going to progressively get worse and worse and worse. And yes, Micah and Katie feel very real. They feel like not like this is actually really happening. I mean, I think being submerged into that world is what really drives this film and what makes you believe it, to be so scared, to be so, on the edge of your seat this whole entire time. Goosebumps on your arms at different parts of this film. And I just think it's, once it has its teeth in you, so to speak, it doesn't let go. And I think you're invested for this, short duration of this film. And yes, like you said, we will talk about how, the second film plays upon the first one, which watching it, because you're removed from that, because you see it. Okay, yeah, this was a great film. Two years later, here comes Paranormal Activity 2. You kind of forget what happens when you watch them. When you start watching them back to back, you're like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, I see what we're doing here. So yeah.
This movie has a continuity that is honestly pretty admirable in terms of just within like the first 4 movies, because as soon as the marked one starts, it's related, but it's also not. That's when things get murky. However,
Yeah.
like 1 through 4, it's rock solid, and I gotta
Yeah.
give Oren Peli credit for keeping this crazy storyline from, considering the source material and what's going on here. Like, it keeps the status quo, if you will, and I appreciate the spirit of that.
So do you want to know a little fun fact about this film?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so the household that it's being filmed in is actually the director's house. Um, I
That's why the movie was so cheap, because the movie
Yeah,
was made for $15,000.
yeah.
See if that
And
makes
that's, and you figure there wasn't a whole lot of wasn't a whole lot behind it. It's a camcorder. It's just like a shoot 'em, find it and shoot it, just like Blair Witch Project. But this, yeah, I found that interesting. It was on Amazon Prime, how they always have the little fun facts, and I always like to try to grab one that I want to share, because I always find that kind of interesting, and something I figured maybe you didn't know. So I was like, hey, two birds, one stone.
No,
But
I did not
yeah,
know that, so that was a good catch there.
yeah,
I think another thing, not just because the movie is so cheap, but because it's also 86 minutes long, and the movie just flies by. It doesn't waste your time.
no,
Like, literally, as soon as the movie starts, you just feel like, okay, something's wrong here. And then, like I said, just over time, it goes and goes and goes until it builds up to the finale, which I don't want to spoil too much here, even though this movie's seen by a lot of people. You just never know, so I don't want to go
yeah,
too deep into it. But let's just say it's been going, going, going. There have been telltale signs of something bad is like happening specifically to Katie, and then,
yeah,
well, Katie is kind of possessed, if you will, and
yeah.
it goes in more into detail in 2 and specifically 4. But basically, Katie's not right. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, and not to really ruin anything, but the ending, I will go to bat. I will Blair Witch vibes for sure. I love the ending of this film. I think it's perfect, and I think it's one of those. Oh my god, you know what I mean? I think it's just one of the. It's a perfect punch. I think it's a perfect period to the end of this film, that you didn't know at the time was going to be a franchise. You know what I mean? I thought it really kind of put its exclamation point on at the end of the film, but I do appreciate the story that we're getting moving forward. But yeah, I love this ending too. I think it's pretty serviceable.
I'm going to give this an amazing grade on my scale. This is honestly, I feel like in terms of found footage, I feel like this deserves to be like among the Blair Witch Company of like greatest of all time for that subgenre. I
Oh yeah,
feel like
100%.
I feel like Oren Pelly really caught lightning in a bottle with that one. And like I said, I feel like 1, 2, and 3 are a great trilogy, but I feel like the pure, unadulterated scariness, for lack of a better word, is never truly replicated in the sequels. And we'll talk more about that as these movies go on. And like I said, 1, 2, and 3 are a great trilogy, but you'll never forget the first time. And when Katie gets pulled out of the bed, oh my god, it takes a lot to unnerve me, and that part unnerves me quite a bit.
Oh yeah, even that and the baby powder. Oh man, I'll tell you what. There's a lot of scenes in that film that put the hair raising up on your arm for sure. Um, and subsequently, I think it does a good job in the second film as well. We'll talk about that. But yeah, I'll put this movie up there with a 5-star rating. I think, like you said, I think out of found footage films, I think this deserves to be right there with Blair Witch Project. Obviously, gonna give the nod to Blair Witch just because it came out first and it really set the tone for that type of found footage genre. But this one's nothing to sneeze at, man. This is a really solid film, short, to the point, effective, and it stays with you.
And the movie leaves off with just a wall of text of Micah's body was never found, but Katie is still missing. You're like,
Which is
what?
like, yeah, when you're watching that, man, that's like, again, it takes me back, honestly. So how random is this one? I'll always remember this. Jason Goes to Hell. Um, do you remember where the scene where it shows the morgue? Did you remember that? Do you see that one at all? Jason Goes to Hell.
Oh yeah, that movie's terrible. I'm
It's
sorry.
really bad. But the morgue was in Youngstown, Ohio. Said where I was actually seeing the film at that time, Youngstown,
Oh
Ohio.
really?
Yeah, which I thought
Wow.
was awesome. I was like, oh my! I said this is so creepy. But I always remember that. I always have that attachment with that, just because I remember we were at a theater in Boardman, which is right outside of Youngstown, Ohio. And I just thought that was it was so random and so cool though.
Well, let's go from 1 to 2, and let's now talk about Paranormal Activity 2. So this was directed by Todd Williams, and it starred Sprague Graydon, I hope I said the name right, Brian Boland, Molly Ephraim, and Micah Slode, Katie Featherston. We'll get to why those two are important in just a minute. But this movie picks up sometime before the events of the first Paranormal Activity. Different house, however, there are connections, and we'll get to those. But it's a home. There are children there. It's a family. It's all good. But then there's a spirit, and it gets crazier from there. And you'll never look at one of those like pots and pans displays that hang overhead the same way ever again. So it's like, even with good horror franchises, the sequel is always going to be like, I feel like here it's like just slightly under for the original. That being said, though, I still really like this one.
Oh yeah, I would throw this like 4.5 stars for sure. I like the how tight we stay to it. Yes, this is a little bit. Micah gets the camera. Obviously, we'll find that out too. That they'll explain that. But this is a little bit right before that. So that's why you see them in the film. You're thinking, what? Wait a minute. And it's funny because when you're watching it, like with the beginning of it, oh, where's Micah? Oh, he doesn't really feel like going out. You're thinking, oh my, wait, is he dead? But you're like, wait a minute, no. You then know that this movie, time frame wise, is taking place before the events of the first Paranormal Activity. But I just think that was kind of cool. That they had you guessing there for a second. Like you were thinking, you're like, wait a minute. Like I knew that, and I'm just like, I hadn't seen it for a while, but yeah, for sure. But yeah, then now you introduce the dynamic of the family, and that's where things get really, really crazy, especially when you have like a relatively younger kid, given like 2-3 years old.
Yeah, and then you also have the dynamic of Allie, who is brought in from another marriage, and there's some tension there. And I have never necessarily known like the intimate details of that, but I can reckon there's some tension there. I'm just spitballing on that one. But there's just the thing about this movie that I've always appreciated is that it keeps the status quo, like I talked about. However, it does introduce new people and relatively new scenarios. Like I remember Cinema Sins, like they were doing this thing. This was a million years ago. It's like cleanest pool ever. Like you see like the pool cleaner like doing its thing, but it's a bigger house, and there are more cameras, and there's more potential for bumps in the night to happen.
For sure. And you got to wonder, what the hell are these people doing for a living? Because they got some nice houses, man.
In 2006, still, like, I mean, I barely remember what the economy was like back then. I was 9. Yeah, I was 9. So I have no idea. Russell would probably know better than me.
But back in, I remember I graduated college in 2007, and then there was a recession. Places weren't hiring. I remember I had to work. I remember I had to work at a coffee shop, making like $8 an hour under the table. I wasn't even actually on the books. I was getting paid under the table, and it was just a hard time to graduate college into a recession. You're like, I remember gas prices were exuberant. They were over $4 a gallon in Pennsylvania. Yeah, it was tough, man. But anyway, what I'm saying is, I'm saying they had to have a really, really good jobs in order to secure houses like that, because those are nice houses. Even looking at this movie in 2025, you know.
Yeah, and this movie is all about the little details. It's like the youngest child, Hunter, is the first male born in the family since the 1930s, and then it's just an add up of like things start small and then they get like pretty big. Like a dog dies and like has a seizure, and you see on the baby monitor like stuff happens with Hunter, and you're just like, okay, this is getting pretty. We need to call a priest. Like someone needs to come in here and do some like exorcism stuff going on.
Yeah, and naturally the one lady, the housekeeper maid lady was escorted out from her job because of the fact that she was doing this, and she was right all along. So kudos to her for having that vibe of something wrong, bad juju going on in the house.
Yeah, she was the canary in the coal mine, if you will.
Yep. And I do appreciate some of the more. I feel like there's some scenes that go harder than the first one. I'm just thinking like the getting dragged out of the bed and stuff like that. I'm not going to explain too much, but yeah, there's a lot more that I think there's a lot more. Boy, they really just it puts the hair up on your back, man, for sure. Just to thinking about some of the scenes in the film, you know.
And like I was talking about, there are connections here, and those connections, more or less, without I get it's weird to like giving a spoiler warning
Yeah,
for a movie
uh,
that's
I
like a
know.
decade old, but I
It's
still
been
don't
yeah,
I don't want to
16 years
like
old.
yeah, but still I don't want to give away too much because like this is a review technically, and I don't
I
want
got
to
you.
necessarily like give away too much. But basically, Christy and Christy and Katie are connected, and it's basically bombshell. There's a big bombshell reveal that, like we alluded to, these movies are connected in terms of time. Just for context, Paranormal Activity 2 takes place in August.
Yeah,
In October, the first Paranormal Activity movie happens. So
yeah.
this is technically a prequel if you really think about it.
Really, it is without actually having been advertised as a prequel. I don't think really it advertised itself as such. You just assumed it was like after the first film, after all the things, the events that took place there. But like you said, there are things that tie in. You find out a little bit more about like how people, you find out more about the story. So the snowball gets bigger. You're rolling it down the hill. There's things that connect. You understand it when you're watching it without going into in depth about it. And I like how they do this. You understand it, and yeah, you just kind of know where we're going on this.
It's like I said, it's similar to the original in that it starts small, but it's like a runaway train going down the tracks and you can't stop it. It's getting an amazing grade from me. It's
For
just
sure.
a step below the first one, but
Yeah.
considering the track record for horror sequels is loosey goosey at best, to maintain a pretty good standard of quality, less than a year apart, and just clearly being like, well, this movie made $150 million on a $15,000 budget. This movie had no right being as good as it was, but it was.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And obviously, this movie does connect on to the next one. So obviously, it leaves you to where, okay, something happens here. Okay, now we know what's going on for the third film. Yeah, I'll put this movie up there with an amazing review as well. I think it's just a notch under the first, but serviceable. It's way better than an average. So if you have a really great horror film and you have another one that comes out and it's not disappointing. I think this movie is just as good as the original. It's just a little bit down. Obviously, the first one's the one that came out first. I think it just had more of the original idea, but I think everything that they talk about in the second one, all the events that happen, I think they hit. I like how they connect the storyline, so it's interwoven and it makes sense. And yeah,
Well, I pass it off to all of you. What did you think? What did you think of the Paranormal Activity movies, specifically 1 and 2? Let us know in the comments. We would love to read what you have to say. And in a few weeks' time, we will be returning to this franchise, talking about 3, 4, and 5. Now, 3 is my personal favorite of the series, and then 4 is where things start to go downhill, but still good, and then 5 is the ghost dimension where everything just completely is playing into the mountainside. Like that's where things go completely off the rails.
which one's the Coven?
Oh crap. That is, I want to say 4?
At the end of the film, there's the Coven.
Yes. No,
Okay,
wait.
that
That could be
or is it?
next of kin. you can tell, like, Russell and I are struggling to remember. Like, we do like these movies, however,
It's
by
been a
the
while,
end,
yeah.
you're just like, we don't know. We just don't know. But
Yeah.
again, pass it off to all of you. What did you think? Uh, Russell, thank you so much for doing this. It's a privilege as always. Where can the people find you?
I appreciate it. Yeah, you guys can find us Notorious by Chance on Facebook. That's where we put polls up. We're obviously not doing that right now. We're still in our movies to fail to start a franchise. We are going to be talking about The Dark Tower. We should be shooting that sometime in the next couple of days. So hopefully that'll be out at the beginning of next week. And then we still have a couple other films that we're going to tackle. We're going to tackle Aragon. And I believe we're going to be doing The Last Airbender, doing a commentary track with that. So that'll be interesting because that'll be the first time that I have seen this film. I've never watched it. So looking forward to that. And then we have some fun stuff coming up in April. And then you guys can find us Notorious by Chance on YouTube as well.
Yeah, Russell's links are in the description. Go give him a subscribe there. This channel is always bustling and got more plans for the month of April, so stay tuned for that. And Russell will be back this coming Friday, or next Friday, excuse me, and we'll be diving back into the world of the 1960s, so more of that to come. But for Russell, my name is Ryan Cam. We will see you all in the next one. Y'all take care.